4-year-old boy approaches millionaire bleeding and says, "Sir, he tried to hurt your daughter." The boy risked his life to save the millionaire's daughter, and in return, the millionaire did something incredible for the boy. Comment on what you think will happen, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The biting cold of the New York night seeped into the bones of little Mikey as he huddled inside a cardboard box soaked by the light drizzle. His tiny fingers, covered in grime, clutched the stale piece of bread he had scavenged from a bakery's trash. At just 4 years old, he already knew the bitter taste of loneliness and abandonment. His last memory of his mom was hazy. She, with glassy eyes and trembling hands, leaving him sitting on the sidewalk in front of some random store, promising to be back in a few minutes. It had happened so long ago that Mikey couldn't tell if it had been days or months. Since then, the streets of New York City had become his home, and hunger his most constant companion. On that particularly cold morning, Mikey wandered through the upscale neighborhood of the Upper East Side, where the leftover food in the trash cans was more plentiful, and some shopkeepers occasionally took pity on his thin frame. His dirty face contrasted with his large, expressive eyes, which maintained a spark of curiosity, even in the face of such adversity. "Get out of here, kid!" shouted the security guard of a luxury apartment building, making Mikey run, startled, behind a dumpster. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the street's activity, studying the best moment to look for something to eat. It was then that a black limousine stopped in front of the building. Mikey watched, fascinated, as a tall man, wearing an impeccable suit, got out of the car. His eyes widened as he noticed the brusque way he was pulling a curly-haired girl by the hand. "Daddy, you're hurting me!" The girl's childish voice was soft, but Mikey could hear it. Something about the scene made his stomach churn, and it wasn't from hunger this time. "Shut up, Lily. Do you have any idea the trouble you've caused me? Those documents were important." The man practically growled the words, squeezing the little girl's arm even harder. Mikey couldn't understand why, but his legs began to move on their own. With the agility acquired on the streets, he managed to sneak into the building unnoticed, taking advantage of the moment when the doorman was distracted on the phone. The elevator was something new to him. Hidden in a corner, he watched the luminous numbers changing as they went up. The man didn't stop scolding the girl, who was crying silently. Mikey felt his heart clench at each of her stifled sobs. "When we get home, you're going to learn not to be so clumsy." The threat in the man's voice made Mikey tremble. The doors opened on the penthouse, and Mikey, moved by an instinct that even he didn't understand, continued to follow father and daughter. The apartment was immense, bigger than any place he had ever seen. He managed to hide behind a sofa while the man dragged the girl down the hallway. "Jonathan Sterling doesn't raise an incompetent daughter," the man shouted, raising his hand. That's when something inside Mikey exploded. Before he could think, his little body was already between the man and the girl. The slap, which was meant for her face, hit his cheek with such force that it threw him against the wall. "Sir, the bad man did this to your daughter," shouted Mikey, confused and scared, looking around as if searching for another adult who could help. The silence that followed was deafening. Jonathan, stunned by the sudden presence of that dirty, ragged boy in his apartment, took a few steps back. Lily took advantage of the moment to move away from her father, running behind an armchair. "How did you get in here?" Jonathan's voice came out as a roar. "Security!" Mikey, still dizzy from the slap, tried to get up. His eyes met Lily's, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and fascination. In that brief moment, something inexplicable passed between the two children, a mutual understanding that transcended words. 2 burly security guards appeared. At the door, "Get this punk out of here and find out how he got in," ordered Jonathan, his face red with fury. The guards' big, rough hands grabbed Mikey by the arms, dragging him out of the apartment. As he was being taken away, he could still hear Lily's muffled cries and see Jonathan's murderous gaze. "If you show up here again, kid, you'll regret it," threatened one of the guards, throwing Mikey onto the sidewalk like a bag of trash. The little body ached from the bruises, but something inside him hurt even more. The image of that crying girl wouldn't leave his head. Even without really understanding what was happening, Mikey knew he needed to do something. That night, lying in his cardboard box in an alley near the apartment building, Mikey couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's frightened face. For the first time since his mother abandoned him, he felt he had a purpose, even if that purpose was bigger than his little body could handle. What Mikey didn't know was that his intrusion that afternoon had planted a seed of change that would forever affect not only his life, but also Lily's and Jonathan's. The gears of fate began to turn, driven by the innocent courage of a street kid who, even though he had nothing, was willing to give everything to protect a stranger. The next morning, Dr. Evelyn Hayes walked through the mirrored corridors of the law firm in downtown Manhattan. Her heels echoed on the marble floor as she tried to ignore the discomfort growing in her chest. As Jonathan Sterling's lawyer for 5 years, she had witnessed various questionable behaviors from her client, but something in the last month had disturbed her deeply. With a folder of documents in hand, Evelyn headed to the conference room where Jonathan was waiting for her. Upon entering, she found him furiously messing with his cell phone, his face contorted in an expression of rage that she knew well. "That brat is back!" Jonathan practically spat the words. "For the 3rd time this week, how does he get past security?" Evelyn sat down, adjusting her glasses. "What brat?" she asked, trying to maintain her professional tone. "A street punk," Jonathan replied, throwing his phone onto the table. "He broke into my apartment a few days ago. Since then, he keeps showing up. This morning, he was sitting on the fire escape of the building, trying to talk to my daughter through her bedroom window." Evelyn's stomach turned. Something in the story didn't make sense. Why would a street child insist on returning to a place where he clearly wasn't welcome? "And your daughter? How is Lily?" she asked cautiously. Jonathan made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "That girl, more rebellious every day. Yesterday she refused to eat. Today she didn't want to go to school. Ever since her mother died, she only gives me trouble." Evelyn knew the story. Clara, Jonathan's wife, had passed away during Lily's birth. Since then, the businessman had plunged into a grief that had turned into bitterness, and subsequently into a constant anger that seemed to grow with each passing day. In Jonathan's apartment, Lily was sitting in her room, hugging the tablet she had received on her last birthday. Through the window, she could see Mikey sitting on the fire escape, waving shyly at her. Despite her fear of her father, something about the presence of that dirty, ragged boy brought her a strange comfort. Hidden by the curtain, Lily turned on the tablet's camera and began to record. She couldn't explain why, but since Mikey appeared, she felt the need to record everything that happened at home. Maybe it was because, for the first time, someone besides her had witnessed her father's violence. "Lily, open this door now." Jonathan's thundering voice made the girl jump. Quickly, she hid the tablet under her pillow. When the door opened, violently, Lily saw not only her father, but also 2 security guards dragging Mikey into the room. The boy struggled, but it was useless against the men's strength. "We found your little friend again," Jonathan said, his voice dangerously calm. "Do you know what happens to people who don't learn their lesson?" Mikey, even bruised and scared, kept his eyes fixed on Lily, as if he wanted to be sure she was okay. His little body trembled, but there was an impressive determination in his eyes. "Dad, please," Lily whispered. "He didn't do anything wrong." "Shut up!" Jonathan shouted, moving towards his daughter with his hand raised. Again, as if moved by an instinct greater than himself, Mikey managed to break free from the security guards and placed himself between Jonathan and Lily. This time, the blow was even more violent, throwing the boy against the toy shelf. Lily screamed, her small hands desperately searching for the tablet under the pillow. With trembling fingers, she managed to start the recording just in time to record her father kicking Mikey, who was lying on the floor. "This is for you to learn not to meddle where you're not wanted," Jonathan shouted, while the security guards watched the scene impassively. In the law firm, Evelyn received a disturbing call from her source in the apartment building. The employee, one of the building's cleaning ladies, reported worriedly the screams coming from Jonathan's apartment. "Dr. Hayes, something very wrong is happening up there." The woman's voice trembled. "It's not the first time I've heard the girl crying, but today, there's a boy too." Evelyn felt her blood run cold. As a lawyer, she had access to information that made her question her client's character more and more. She knew of shady deals, ruined competitors, harassed employees, but violence against children. That was a line she couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, in the apartment, Mikey was again dragged. Out this time more hurt than the other times. His body ached, but his eyes maintained that same determination. Before being thrown onto the street, he managed to look once more at the window of Lily's room, where the girl was watching him crying. That night, alone in his alley, Mikey cried not from pain, but from frustration. His attempts to protect Lily only seemed to worsen the situation, but something inside him, a force that he didn't even understand, prevented him from giving up. What no one knew was that Lily's recordings were accumulating on her tablet. Scenes of violence, screams, threats, all recorded by the frightened eyes of a 4-year-old child who, like Mikey, was finding her own way to fight. In his private office, Jonathan received the unexpected visit of Olivia Bancroft, his biggest rival in the market. The businesswoman, elegant and calculating, brought with her not only business proposals, but also a meticulously planned revenge scheme. "I heard you're having problems with intruders in your penthouse," Olivia commented casually, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "It must be difficult to keep up appearances when people start asking inconvenient questions." Jonathan narrowed his eyes, suspicious. What did Olivia know? And more importantly, what did she plan to do with this information? Night fell over New York City, enveloping the city in shadows that hid increasingly deeper secrets. In Jonathan's apartment, Lily hugged her tablet, trembling at every noise. In his alley, Mikey was planning his next attempt to help the only friend he had ever had. And in the corridors of power, invisible gears began to move, threatening to crumble the empire that Jonathan built on foundations of violence and fear. The sun had not yet risen when Mikey woke up startled in his cardboard box. Nightmares with Lily's screams haunted him more and more. His small body ached from the last blows received, but an idea began to form in his childish mind. If he couldn't face Jonathan directly, he needed to find another way to help his friend. In the luxurious apartment in the Upper East Side, Lily also couldn't sleep. Hugging her stuffed rabbit, the girl trembled every time she heard footsteps in the hallway. Since her mother had died, something she only knew through the bitter stories her father told, she had never felt what security or love was until she met Mikey. Carefully, Lily picked up her tablet and reviewed some of the recordings she had made. On the small screen, the images of her father screaming, hitting, threatening, seemed even more frightening. A tear ran down her face when she saw again the scene of Mikey being beaten on the last visit. In the law firm, Evelyn spent the early morning reviewing documents. She couldn't get out of her head the stories she had heard about what was happening. In her client's apartment, the lawyer picked up an old file from when she started working for Jonathan. There were the records of the empire he built and the lives he destroyed in the process. "How could I have been so blind?" she murmured to herself, running her fingers over a newspaper clipping that talked about the mysterious bankruptcy of Olivia Bancroft's parents. The next morning, Jonathan arrived earlier than usual at his office. Deep dark circles marked his face, revealing sleepless nights. Olivia's visit the day before had left him disturbed. He knew that his rival wouldn't show up without a reason, and the insinuations about people asking inconvenient questions worried him. "Mr. Sterling," his secretary interrupted his thoughts, "Dr. Hayes is here, says it's urgent." Evelyn entered the room holding a red folder. Her normally controlled face showed an unusual tension. "We need to talk about your daughter," she said bluntly. Jonathan slammed his fist on the table. "There is nothing to talk about Lily. Take care of the contracts, Doctor. That's what I pay you for." "There is a limit, Jonathan," Evelyn continued, her voice trembling slightly. "People are talking. The building employees, the neighbors. Are you threatening me?" Jonathan stood up abruptly, his voice dangerously low. Before Evelyn could answer, they were interrupted by a call. It was from the apartment building. The street kid had appeared again. In the apartment, Lily was playing alone in her room when she heard a noise at the window. Her heart raced when she saw Mikey waving from outside. This time he looked different, more hurt than usual, but with a determined glint in his eyes. "Lily," he whispered when she cracked open the window, "I need your tablet." The girl hesitated for a moment, but something in Mikey's eyes made her trust him. Carefully, she passed the device through the window. "Why?" she asked softly. "I'm going to show it to someone good," Mikey replied, his childish voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. "Someone who can help." What neither of them knew was that, at that exact moment, one of the security guards was already climbing the fire escape. Mikey barely had time to hide the tablet in his threadbare shirt before he was grabbed violently. "That's enough, brat!" the security guard shouted, dragging Mikey by the hair. "The boss will settle this once and for all." Lily, paralyzed with fear, watched her friend being taken away. This time, something seemed different. The look on the security guard's face carried a cruelty she had never seen before. In the office, Jonathan received the news by phone, his face contorted into a mask of fury. "Get rid of him," he ordered. "I don't want this problem anymore." Evelyn, who was still in the room, felt her blood run cold. "Jonathan, they're just children," she tried to argue. "Think about what you're doing." "Get out of my office, Doctor," he growled. "And remember, your career depends on your discretion." In the apartment building, Mikey was dragged to the underground garage. The security guard threw him against a wall with such force that the tablet fell from his shirt, sliding under a car. "The boss ordered us to set an example," another security guard approached, cracking his knuckles. What followed was an explosion of violence that no child should ever experience. Punches and kicks rained down on Mikey's small body, who tried to protect himself, huddled on the floor. In his mind, confused by the pain, he could only think of Lily and the tablet that contained the proof of everything. In the apartment, Lily cried desperately, feeling that something terrible was happening. Without her tablet, without her friend, without anyone to protect her, the girl felt more alone than ever. It was then that she remembered something her teacher had taught her at school. A number to call when children were in danger. 911. With trembling hands, she picked up the landline in the living room and dialed. "Help," she whispered when someone answered. "Please, they're hurting my friend." In the garage, Mikey was already semi-conscious when a car entered, illuminating the scene with its headlights. It was Olivia Bancroft. The businesswoman, upon seeing what was happening, didn't hesitate to use her cell phone to record everything. At that moment, several things happened simultaneously. Sirens began to sound in the distance, approaching the apartment building. Evelyn, who had followed her conscience instead of her ambition, arrived with authorities. And Lily's tablet, still hidden under the car, continued to record everything, its memory full of evidence that would forever change the fate of everyone involved. The security guards, frightened by the sirens, fled, leaving Mikey lying on the garage floor. The boy, even hurt, dragged himself to reach the tablet. His last awareness before passing out was of gentle arms lifting him up and a female voice saying, "It's going to be okay, little one. It's over." What no one knew was that that wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a transformation that would deeply affect every person involved in that story. A transformation that began with the courage of a street kid and the determination of a girl who, even in the midst of fear, found strength to ask for help. The pediatric hospital room was silent, except for the constant beep of the monitors. Mikey, lying in the bed that seemed too big for his small body, was covered in bandages and bruises. Beside him, Evelyn held his delicate hand, watching the bruised face of the boy who, even unconscious, maintained an expression of concern. In the hallway, social workers discussed the case in hushed voices. The situation was complex. A street kid, without documents, without known family, had been brutally beaten in the garage of one of the most luxurious apartment buildings in New York City. At the same time, the daughter of powerful businessman Jonathan Sterling was in protective custody after the discovery of a tablet full of disturbing videos. "How is he?" asked a soft voice. It was Olivia Bancroft, who entered the room carrying a new teddy bear. "The doctors say he will survive," replied Evelyn, her voice choked. "But the psychological trauma, he's so small." Olivia approached the bed, placing the bear next to Mikey. Her face, normally composed and cold, showed genuine emotion. "You know, I was his age when Jonathan destroyed my family," she confessed, sitting in the other chair. In another room in the same hospital, Lily was sitting on her bed, hugging her knees. The social worker tried to talk to her, but the girl remained silent, her eyes fixed on the window as if looking for something or someone. "Honey, we need you to tell us what was happening at home," the social worker insisted gently. Lily finally turned her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want to see Mikey," was all she said. At the police station, Jonathan was sitting in an interrogation room, his expensive suit rumpled, his hands cuffed on the table. The images from Lily's tablet had been recovered, showing not only the violence against her, but also the multiple assaults against Mikey. "Mr. Sterling," the detective spoke while leafing through a thick file, "besides the charges of domestic violence and attempted murder, we have here very interesting documents about your business dealings." Jonathan remained silent, but his face betrayed a mixture of anger and fear. The walls he had built around himself, made of money and intimidation, began to crumble. At the hospital, Mikey began to stir in bed. His eyes opened slowly, disoriented. The first thing he did was try to get up, muttering, "Lily, I need to help." "Calm down, little one." Evelyn held him gently. "Lily is safe now. You both are." "Safe?" Mikey looked at her with his big, scared eyes. "Promise?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "I promise," Evelyn replied, feeling her heart clench. It was at that moment that Olivia did something unexpected. She took an envelope from her pocket and handed it to Evelyn. "These are the documents that prove how Jonathan defrauded my parents' company," she explained. "I kept this for years, waiting for the right moment to get revenge. But now I think they can serve a greater purpose." In the days that followed, a silent transformation began to happen. Evelyn, who had always put her career above everything, resigned from the law firm. Using her savings and the documents provided by Olivia, she opened a legal aid project for children at risk. Mikey slowly recovered, not only from the physical injuries, but also from the emotional trauma. Every day he asked about Lily, the doctors and social workers, realizing the special bond between the two children finally allowed a supervised meeting. When Lily entered Mikey's room, accompanied by the social worker, time seemed to stop. The girl ran to the bed, her little hands searching for her friends. "You saved my life," Lily whispered, hugging Mikey carefully so as not to hurt him. "You saved mine too," he replied, smiling for the first time since waking up in the hospital. Meanwhile, in prison, Jonathan faced his own demons. Alone in his cell, he was forced to repeatedly watch the videos recorded by Lily. Seeing himself through his daughter's frightened eyes was destroying the layers of anger and bitterness he had built since Clara's death. One afternoon, he received an unexpected visit. It was Father Michael, the prison chaplain, bringing a letter from Lily. With trembling hands, Jonathan opened the envelope and found a drawing. Her, him, and Mikey, all holding hands, with a smiling son in the corner of the page. "Your daughter has an extraordinary heart," commented Father Michael, observing the tears that began to stream down the businessman's face. "I blamed her," Jonathan finally confessed, his voice broken. "I blamed an innocent child for the death of her own mother. What kind of monster does that?" At the hospital, Mikey received news that would change his life. After weeks of investigation, the social workers had located his mother in a rehabilitation clinic. She, after hitting rock bottom, had sought help, tormented by the guilt of having abandoned her son. "She wants to see you," explained the social worker, "but only if you want to." Mikey was silent for a long time, processing the information. Finally, he looked at Lily, who was holding his hand, and then at Evelyn, who had become a constant presence in his life. "Can I think about it for a bit?" he asked, his small voice carrying a maturity beyond his years. Olivia, who followed everything closely, had made an important decision. Using her resources and connections, she began to reorganize the companies she had recovered from Jonathan, transforming them into a foundation dedicated to helping homeless children. "You know," she said to Evelyn while they watched Mikey and Lily playing in the hospital garden, "sometimes the best revenge is to turn pain into something positive." The sun set over New York City, painting the sky with shades of orange. In the hospital room, Mikey and Lily shared a piece of cake that a nurse had brought, talking in their own language, made of glances and complicit smiles. Outside, Evelyn organized the papers that would forever change the fate of those children. On her desk, two different but equally important processes: an application for temporary custody for Mikey and a protective action for Lily. What no one knew was that, while the children shared their cake, Jonathan, in his cell, made the most difficult decision of his life. With the help of Father Michael, he began to write a letter, a complete confession not only of his business crimes, but mainly of his failures as a father. Autumn in New York painted the trees with shades of yellow when Mikey was discharged from the hospital. During the past weeks, his small body had recovered from the physical injuries, but the emotional scars were still fresh. Evelyn, who had become his temporary guardian, packed a small backpack with the few clothes he had received during his stay. "Ready?" she asked softly, watching the boy who was looking through the room's window. Mikey nodded, but his eyes searched for something or someone in the hallway. "Isn't Lily coming to say goodbye?" His voice trembled slightly. As if answering his question, hurried steps sounded in the hallway. Lily ran into the room, her curly hair bouncing with the movement. Behind her, the social worker tried, without success, to make her walk slower. "Oh, you can't leave," Lily exclaimed, throwing herself into her friend's arms. "Who is going to protect me?" Evelyn's heart clenched at the scene. The two children had developed such a deep bond that it seemed cruel to separate them now. But the circumstances were complex. While Mikey would go home with her, Lily would remain in state custody until Jonathan's situation was resolved. In prison, Jonathan received the visit of Father Michael. The businessman, once imposing and authoritarian, now seemed smaller, as if the weight of his actions had compressed him physically. "I read your letter," said the priest, sitting on the other side of the visiting table. "It's an important start, Jonathan. Recognizing our mistakes is the first step to redemption." Jonathan ran his hands over his tired face. "How can I ask my daughter for forgiveness? How can I explain that I turned my pain into violence, that I blamed her for her mother's death when she was just an innocent baby?" The priest observed the broken man in front of him. "Forgiveness is a process, not an event. Your daughter needs to see real change, not just words." Meanwhile, in Evelyn's modest apartment, Mikey explored his new room with cautious curiosity. It was a simple space, but for someone who had slept in cardboard boxes, it seemed like a palace. "This teddy bear is yours," Evelyn said, placing the gift that Olivia had taken to the hospital on the bed. "And look, I bought some books for us to read together." Mikey touched the books with reverence, his small fingers tracing the colorful figures on the covers. Can I learn to read?" he asked timidly. "Of course you can," Evelyn replied, swallowing the lump that formed in her throat. "We'll enroll you in school as soon as you're stronger." At the rehabilitation clinic, Maria, Mikey's mother, participated in another therapy session. The guilt of having abandoned her son consumed her daily, but she was determined to recover, not only for herself, but mainly for him. "He agreed to see me," she told the therapist, her hands trembling slightly. "But I'm so scared. What if he hates me? What if he never forgives me?" The therapist, a gray-haired lady with gentle eyes, leaned forward. "Your son has demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for love and compassion, risking his own life to protect a stranger. That kind of heart is not born from hate." In her foundation's office, Olivia reviewed the documents of the new project. With Evelyn's help, she was transforming an old warehouse into a shelter for street children. The place would offer not only shelter, but also education and psychological support. "Sometimes I think I wasted years planning revenge," confessed to Evelyn during a meeting. "It took a 4-year-old boy to show me that there are more powerful ways to do justice." The days turned into weeks. Mikey began attending therapy sessions, where he slowly learned to process his traumas. On nights when nightmares woke him up screaming, Evelyn was there, hugging him and whispering words of comfort. One afternoon, during a supervised visit, Lily brought a drawing for Mikey. In it, she had portrayed the two playing in a sunny park. "The social worker said that you're going to meet your mum tomorrow," she commented, observing her friend with concern. Mikey nodded, squeezing the teddy bear against his chest. "I'm scared," he admitted softly. "But you are the bravest person I know," Lily exclaimed. "You saved me even though you were scared of my dad." The next day, at the rehabilitation center, Mikey held Evelyn's hand while he waited for his mother in the visiting room. When Maria entered, time seemed to freeze. She was different from the confused memories that Mikey held, cleaner, more present, but with the same sad eyes. "My son," Maria whispered, falling to her knees a few steps away, respecting the boy's space. "Forgive me." Mikey looked at Evelyn, who nodded encouragingly, then at his mother. Slowly, he took a step towards her. "Are you going to leave again?" he asked, his small voice laden with fear. "No, my love," Maria replied through tears. "Never again. I'm fighting to stay clean, to be the mother you deserve." While mother and son tried to rebuild a bridge over the abyss that separated them, Jonathan received an unexpected visit in prison. It was his lawyer, not Evelyn, who had resigned, but a new representative. "Mr. Sterling," she began formally, "I analyzed your case. With the documents you provided, voluntarily confessing your business crimes and agreeing to make restitution to the victims, we can negotiate an alternative sentence. But there's a condition. Jonathan raised his eyes. Which one? You need to agree to undergo intensive therapy and participate in a rehabilitation program for aggressors. Your daughter deserves a transformed father, not just a repentant one. Outside the prison, New York City continued its frenetic pace. But in the lives that had been touched by the courage of a street kid, something was changing. It was as if Mikey's altruistic gesture had triggered a chain reaction of transformations, proving that even the most hardened hearts could learn to love again. Spring arrived in New York City, bringing not only flowers, but also the seeds of transformation that had been planted months ago. In Evelyn's small apartment, Mikey packed his backpack for school, now with more confidence in his movements. 6 months had passed since his release from the hospital, and the boy who once slept in cardboard boxes now had a home, a routine and, more importantly, people who loved him. "Don't forget your lunch," Evelyn reminded him, helping him with his school uniform. Her eyes welled up as she saw how he had changed, not only physically, but in his way of being. The constant fear in his eyes had been replaced by a serenity that only true love can bring. At the rehabilitation clinic, Maria participated in her last session. After months of intensive treatment, she was about to be discharged. Her therapist smiled as she read the notes about her progress. "You're ready, Maria," said the professional. "But remember, recovery is a daily journey." Maria nodded, clutching a photo of Mikey to her chest. In recent weeks, the meetings with her son had become more frequent and natural. Slowly, they were rebuilding their relationship, one small step at a time. At the shelter created by Olivia, dozens of homeless children found not only shelter but also hope. The businesswoman, who once lived for revenge, discovered a greater purpose in her life. With Evelyn's help, she transformed her bitterness into positive action. "Each child we help," said Olivia during a meeting, "is a victory not only over poverty, but over the cycle of violence that permeates our society." In prison, Jonathan received the results of his psychological evaluation. After 6 months of intensive therapy and participation in the rehabilitation program, professionals noted significant changes in his behavior. "Mr. Sterling," said his therapist, "you have made remarkable progress. But the real test will be when you are on parole." Jonathan nodded, looking at the drawing that Lily had sent him the week before. In it, the girl had portrayed all her new family. Her, Mikey, Evelyn, Maria, and even him, all together in a big circle. "I don't want to be that person anymore," he said, his voice choked. "My daughter deserves a real father, not a monster driven by rage." On a sunny afternoon, something extraordinary happened. In the park near Evelyn's apartment, all the people involved in that story gathered. It was Lily's idea, who insisted on celebrating Mikey's birthday with everyone present. Mikey, wearing a new shirt he had received from his mother, watched in wonder as people arrived. Lily ran to hug him as soon as she arrived, her curls swaying in the wind. "Happy birthday," she exclaimed, handing him a colorful package. Inside was a new tablet, just like the one she had used to record the videos that changed their lives. "Now you can learn to read and write even better." Maria arrived next, bringing a cake she had made with her own hands at the recovery home, where she now worked as a kitchen assistant. Her eyes shone with pride as she saw her son surrounded by friends. Olivia brought not only gifts, but also extraordinary news. "The shelter will expand," she announced. "We will open 3 more units by the end of the year." Evelyn, who watched everything with tears in her eyes, felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Father Michael, who had become a friend and advisor in recent months. "You know," he said, "sometimes God uses the most unlikely people to teach us the Most important lessons. The most tense and significant moment of the afternoon arrived, when Jonathan, on his first authorized outing from prison, approached the group. He was different, thinner, humbler, with an expression of genuine remorse on his face. Mikey, upon seeing him, instinctively took a step back, but Lily, surprising everyone, ran to hug her father. "Daddy is different now," she explained to Mikey, holding out her hand to him. "He learns every day not to be mean anymore." Jonathan knelt down, getting to the children's height. "Mikey," he said, his voice trembling, "I'll never be able to erase what I did, but I want you to know that you taught me the most important lesson of my life. You protected my daughter when I, who should have been her protector, was her biggest threat." Mikey looked at Evelyn, then at his mother, seeking security. Upon receiving encouraging smiles from both, he took a small step forward. "Do you promise to never hurt Lily again?" he asked with his childish voice, but laden with a wisdom beyond his years. "I promise," Jonathan replied, tears streaming down his face. "I'm learning to be a real father. And I've also learned that family is not just who has the same blood, but who helps us be better people." At that moment, something magical happened. Mikey, the boy who had faced so much fear and suffering, smiled. A true smile, full of hope. "Okay then," he said simply, taking Lily's hand, "because now we are all a different family." Mikey's simple words touched everyone present in a profound way. There, in that park in New York City, people who were once driven by anger, fear, and despair were now united by love and transformation. Evelyn announced that she was starting the process to legally adopt Mikey, with the support and participation of Maria, who would continue to be present in her son's life. Jonathan, fulfilling his alternative sentence, began working at Olivia's shelter, using his business experience to help expand the project. The sun set on the New York City horizon when the party began to end. Mikey and Lily, inseparable as always, played under the shade of a flowering tree. Their laughter echoed through the park, symbolizing the victory of love over fear, of compassion over violence. "Sometimes," Evelyn said to Maria while they watched the children, "angels come in the form of little street warriors." Maria smiled, wiping away a tear. "And sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters." And so on that spring afternoon, a new story began. A story no longer of suffering and abandonment, but of redemption and love. Mikey, the boy who had nothing but courage in his heart, now had something much more precious. A family. Not a traditional family, but one woven with the golden threads of forgiveness, transformation, and hope.